epiphany moment?
Oh, my epiphany moment with Erickson.
Yes.
Oh, that was, Jeff Zeig once asked me if I'd ever had an epiphany moment.
You know, he has great questions, Jeff Zeig.
What's that?
Jeff has great questions,
Yes,
doesn't he?
he asked me if I ever had an epiphany moment with Milton. And it took me about a day or two to pull together, but I suddenly realized that yes, it was my very last session just before he passed on in 1980. I showed Erickson some of my studies of mind-body rhythms, and I asked him, had he ever heard of mind-body rhythms, alternating rhythms, and he said no, he had not. My interest in these rhythms were because Milton's sessions were going to typical hour and a half, 2-hour cycle. When you go to see a movie, it's typically an hour and a half or so. Go to a concert. So our everyday social, cultural life is broken up into hour and a half experiential, hour and a half work units. Then we need to take a break, a coffee or whatever. So I immediately hypothesized, yes, this could be the basis of Erickson's success with psychosomatic symptoms. So I asked him, could this be the basis of it? And I showed him all the research on alternating rhythms and all the connection of natural behaviors and natural physiology with these hour and a half cycles. And after a pause of a couple of minutes, I looked at him and I saw his eyes were starting to tear up, and so were mine when I expressed the idea that could this be why you are so successful with mind-body problems? Because you pick up a person's natural rhythm and you go with that. I notice that when a client comes in and they're kind of tired and already sleepy, you will often induce hypnosis right away. Other clients come in and they're full of energy, they're pacing around the office. You will engage them in lengthy conversations about this story and that story, and your voice gets slower and slower, and they pick up your slower voice and they start slowing down. They get down to what we call the low point of the ultradian rhythm, which I believe, which I hypothesize, is synonymous with a moment of needing rest and relaxation. And those are moments when gene expression and brain plasticity is turning on. So that was our epiphany moment. Could this be, could the basis of psychosocial suggestions, focused attention, positive expectation, could this be the physiological basis? It was turning on gene expression, brain plasticity, and the facilitation of new proteins being constructed in the brain, hormones and so forth.
And where has that question led you to from that time of first looking into that? Where has that led you to looking, and where is both your studies at the moment in terms of that? What's your current thinking?
Well, that's good to go. You know, we'll go into the studies. I have a quick question right before yours, and that is the last session that you had with Milton. We wrote it up, and I can't remember which volume of the collected works we wrote that up, but that the question that you had for Milton as he was doing some therapy with you was, how can I have an open mind?
Yes, that's...
It's like the most important question that one could ask,
Yeah.
and you didn't know that was going to be your last question of his.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that was an epiphany moment of that rarely do we get a glimpse into your mind, Ernie,
Yes.
and really where you were. And I can't remember which volume of the collected works.
Yes, can I show you that volume? I believe it's volume 3.
You think it's, yeah, I think it is volume 3. Because it's so interesting to, as I believe that
Volume 3 is called Opening the Mind.
that's right, Opening the Mind.
And it refers to that last session when Milton and his personal physician, Marion Moore, both were working as co-therapists with me. And what was my questions? What did I want to learn in my work with them? Well, how do I have an open mind to learn everything I can possibly need to be a better therapeutic hypnosis practitioner?
Interestingly, this is what John Grinder also picked up this. He calls it the know-nothing state. The know-nothing state, where you literally shut it all down and make yourself fully open to receive all channels of information.
Yes.
And it's interesting because John Grinder, who of course is Professor of Linguistics, he makes a big thing of that, whereas Richard Bandler doesn't. And John says one of the things about Milton was this thing where you have to take your prejudgments out, and you have to listen with your eyes and hear with your, listen
Hear with your eyes.
Yeah, it's that. Yeah, no, it's hear with your eyes and listen, and listen with your eyes and see with your ears, almost. Where, in other words, all of your senses are open to everything.
Yes.
And John makes a really big thing of this, and it's interesting for me because I've trained with them both. That Richard really doesn't, and so. You're touching on something there that, So you
idea we share in common.
Yeah. So, but you were saying about how do you have an open mind?
That's right, and that's what that whole session with Milton and Marion Moore was about. Giving me analogy after metaphor and so forth, examples of how to have an open mind.
Oh, it's a wonderful case write up and that we included in that new volume.
Yes,
and that the spirit of Milton Erickson. Why do people love Milton Erickson? It's that he would come from the point of view that you were coming from, and so there was everybody had a different experience with him. And that's what's important in teaching therapists about doing therapy, is that it's so much more alive when it's not your idea, the therapist, but it's really building on what the client's ideas are. And we try to take it now in our research, and what gets us up in the morning and makes us excited to be alive is how can we take modern science today and use that and see if we can get more underneath of what's going on. And so we become fascinated with the genomic revolution. And whereas genetics is that really stable, DNA of what's your eye color, your height, the types of things that don't change. And then there's the epigenetics. There's the ways and the combinations in which your genes can express combinations of things that are fluid. And so maybe you can make mention, Ernie, of these studies that we've been working on and with, and what we've been encouraging people around the world who are interested in research, of how they can take it a little further.
Our most recent research is how mental activities like therapeutic hypnosis or meditation or the therapeutic placebo or yoga, mental activities are expressed at the genomic level. And then the genes give expression to the proteins that make the hormones and neuroplasticity that actually changes the structure of the brain, and that becomes the basis, the organic basis of a new level of consciousness. So it's mind turning on RNA, RNA turning on DNA, genes, giving rise to new brain structures, giving rise to new mind. So you have this continual cycle of mind-gene expression, as I call it.
And literally growing neural connections. It's literally building flesh, you know, so you're
Yes.
building new neural connections and actually birthing new neurons. And so it's
Yes.
not a metaphor. This is actual physical.
Yes, we're actually facilitating the growth, the maturation of stem cells of the brain to become mature neurons that make new neural networks that is the new, gives rise to the new consciousness. So you might say, have we resolved the Rene Descartes Cartesian dichotomy between brain and mind? Now, Descartes said a couple centuries ago, mind and physical matter, brain, are two different modalities. They don't, well, then some other philosophers say they interact, other philosophers said they don't interact. Well, that's what we're trying to do, document how the mental experience is, yes, converted into changing patterns of RNAs that communicate to the genes and tell the genes what patterns of proteins to turn on and make. So have we resolved Cartesian dualism? From my attitude, I think we have. Others can dispute the philosophical implications, but that's another field. We are interested in the empirical demonstration of our mind, imagination, emotional experience, stress, as well as joy and beauty, can change the pattern of gene expression, and that gives rise to a new brain and new consciousness. I can't say it more clearly.